Hello there. Welcome. Today we have a treat. We have a filmmaker from Vermont, Bess O'Brien, and she is going to be showing some films. So Bess O'Brien is an award-winning documentary filmmaker and theater producer. Her latest project is Just Getting By. That's the name of it. It's not Just Getting By. A feature film focused on Vermonters who are struggling with food and housing insecurity. Other documentary films O'Brien has directed recently are Coming Home, focused on 5 people returning to their Vermont communities from prison. In 2021, Bess also produced the Listen Up Project, an original musical based on the lives of Vermont teens. The film version of the show premiered in 2022. Bess co-founded Kingdom County Productions with her husband, Jay Craven, in 1991. She is also the director-producer of the highly acclaimed feature film Shout It Out, based on the lives of Vermont teens, and the original Voices Project, live musical. O'Brien co-produced the feature films Where the Rivers Flow North, starring Rip Torn, Cantu Cardinal, and Michael J. Fox, and A Stranger in the Kingdom, starring Ernie Hudson and Martin Sheen. Can you please join me in welcoming Bess O'Brien?
Hello, hello. Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks so much to EEE and Paul and Burton and Travis, my friend over there, who's helping me make this all happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to show a couple of short clips from 2 of my films. But first I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my work, and then afterwards we can have some Q&A. So I've been making documentary films for about 30 years. I've made about 13 films, documentary films. And, you know, the films over the years have been about a lot of big issues in Vermont. And of course, there are also big issues in the world. So I've made films. I made a film called The Hungry Heart in 2012 and 13 about the opiate addiction problem in Vermont. I made a film that you're going to see tonight called Ask Us Who We Are, about the foster care system in Vermont. I've made a film about coming home, about people coming out of incarceration into small towns in the state. I just finished making a film called Just Getting By about food and housing insecurity in Vermont. So, you know, really upbeat subjects. And often people say, you know, well, why do you make these films? You know, aren't they depressing? Like, don't you get, like, isn't it really tough to make the movies? And what I always say is, first of all, I think to understand these issues, where we really have to go is to the personal stories, because often we hear about, oh, there's a huge opiate epidemic, or right now, of course, you know, food and housing insecurity, homelessness, whatever. And many of us tend to hear about it, read it in the news, and that's fine, but we often don't connect to the people on the ground who are really dealing with these issues every day. And so for me, people often ask, well, how do you choose these films, these issues? And something about them I'm interested in knowing more about, and I want to hear from the actual people who are struggling with that issue. So my films are very personal. They're very focused on the narrative of the people who are struggling every day with these. And all of my films, when they're finished, tour extensively through the state. So the other thing that I'm really committed to is to bring these films around and have conversations with people. So this last film that I made that we're going to have to see a little bit of, Just Getting By, we toured it all last year. I think we had 100 screenings across Vermont, in town halls, church basements, theaters, conferences, college campuses, universities, libraries. And the idea was for people to see the film, and this is about their home state, and these are people who live in their home state, and in many cases, people recognize people in the movies. And so there's a sense of this is not an issue that is happening in California or New York City. It's actually right here in Vermont, and this is the human story that we're looking at. The other thing that people often say to me is, how can you get these people to tell these stories? Because as you will see, these are intense stories sometimes. If you're dealing with people around addiction or foster care or whatever, you know, why would these people want to tell you their stories? And what I often say is, first of all, you know, we live in a country where maybe not this crowd, but most people know every single thing about Taylor Swift. Does everybody know who Taylor Swift is? Okay, good. Uh, you know, we know what she does in the morning, who she's seeing in the evening, but we rarely know what our neighbor is doing or who our neighbor is or that person that we see every day at the grocery store. Like, who are they? And so I'm interested in hearing the everyday stories of people, and I'm interested in raising those stories to the forefront. And so I have done a lot of movies and I've interviewed a lot of people, and it's very, very rare that I email or call somebody to ask them for an interview. I'm like, you know, I'm making this film about heroin addiction. Your daughter or son had an overdose and died. Would you be willing to talk to me? And they will say yes. That's pretty extraordinary, because a lot of times people would say no. I don't. Most people would think that no. Or, I'm doing a film about incarceration. You just got out of prison. I'm just wondering if you would talk to me about what it's like to come back into your own community. And most people say, I'll talk to you. Well, why is that? Why is that? It's because I think that, frankly, most people do want to tell their story, okay? And we just don't ask them. We don't ask them. And especially people who have gone through difficult things, there's a lot of shame around all that. There's a lot of feeling like, you know, no one wants to hear my story. I'm a bad person, or I used to be like that and I want to hide that part of my life. But then when you say, you know, I'm really interested, I really want to listen to what you have to say, all of a sudden they're like, really? And then I get in my car and I drive out to some, you know, the end of some dirt road, and this person that I've never met before, I walk in with my camera guy and set up the lights and we sit down, total strangers. I don't know the person, they don't know me. And all of a sudden we're like talking about these really intense things for an hour and a half. And it's sort of magic. It's sort of amazing. And for me, what I take away is just the strength, the courage, the resilience of these particular people. And I learn a lot myself. And so I feel like if I'm learning something, other people will learn something. The other thing, of course, is that all of us probably in this room have struggled with something in our lives. Or we know somebody who has struggled with something or has gone through trauma. And so it's not that far away, perhaps, from our own struggles. Maybe it's a different class of people, or maybe it's somebody younger or older. But a lot of times we can relate to these stories. And that's important, because empathy is the first step towards change. Unless you connect with other people, unless you understand other people, we're never going to be able to work with each other to create positive change. And so part of my work is, I guess, sort of like a crusade, or a way of trying to start a conversation in Vermont that really changes the conversation. I will say that probably my biggest film was this film, Hungry Heart, where I focused on the opiate epidemic in 2012 up in St. Albans with this pediatrician, Fred Holmes, and who was like a country pediatrician, and realized one day that half of the people, young people that he was serving, were addicted to prescription drugs. And he called me and he said, Bess, I think we need to make a movie about this, because this is happening under my nose. I don't even know about it, and we need to deal with it. And so he made this film, Hungry Heart. We toured it all over the state. And that film really caught fire because the governor, somebody handed the governor, this was Shumlin at the time, a DVD and said, you got to watch this movie, man, because this stuff is happening. I mean, he knew that there was all this rumblings and that there was an opiate addiction, but he watched the movie. And in December of 2012, I got a call from the governor's office, and they said, the governor has watched your movie, and he would like to focus his entire state of the state on the opiate addiction. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but it was actually a big deal. because apparently no governor in the entire country had ever focused on one thing during their State of the State. And so he said, the governor would like to reference your film and honor the people in the movie because they were so courageous to come out and tell their stories. Is that okay with you? And of course, as a filmmaker, I was like, yes, because this is what a documentary filmmaker wants, right? They want their film to actually reach politicians or reach people who can actually start making a difference. And so he made the speech, he referenced the film, and because of this, the New York Times and all these other national papers were blowing up the next day about the fact that Vermont, this perfect state, has a big problem with opiate addiction. And there was my film in part of the New York Times article. And so that then opened up a whole thing about the film touring across the country for 2 years, representing really a rural perspective on addiction. Because until then, a lot of sensibilities around addiction or these issues, we tended to look at urban cases. But this was really around rural areas. And so I spent a whole year traveling all over the country showing the film. And that was a real sense of raising consciousness in your own state, creating a film that really started conversations in other states. And it was very terrific. And I toured all over with people in the movie. And so it was also really empowering to them to be able to have their stories so elevated. So that's just a snippet of one of my films. The film I'm going to show right now is called Ask Us Who We Are. It was made, maybe 15 years ago. And it's about kids in foster care. This film, people also say, how do you get these ideas? Sometimes I just am interested in them. But a lot of times people come up to me and say, oh, your next movie should be this. Oh, your next movie should be that. And so this film came to me from a foster care kid who came to one of my projects before and said, I think your next movie should be about us because nobody really understands our story. And I said, that's interesting. I don't really know that much about foster care. Why not? And so she and I went to the commissioner of DCF because, believe it or not, I need money to make these movies. So I was like, where are we going to get the money to make this movie? And she said, well, I've been on a couple panels with the commissioner of DCF. Let's go talk to him. I said, okay. So we showed up, we talked to him, and he was like, what are you talking about? We don't make movies here. We're not a film studio. I said, no, but you should put some money into this because this film is going to raise consciousness about what you guys are doing. Long story short, they helped produce the movie along with a number of other donors. And we toured this film for about a year and a half across Vermont and also across the country. So we're going to show the first 5 to 7 minutes of this, and then I'll talk a little bit more, and then we're going to show some clips from another movie and sort of talk about the differences in style and how you reacted to them. So anyway, let's watch Ask Us Who We Are. And I don't know how the sound is, but hopefully it'll be good for you guys.
When I was about 7 or 8, my dad started hitting us. I found out when I was older that's when he started drinking more. And that's when he really became an alcoholic.
My father was old school to the point that if he spoke once, that's all it was. If it took more than once, you knew it was coming. As simple as that.
My dad was big, and he would use that. He was racist, cowardly, had no problem hating women, picking on people smaller than him, a liar, just all around not a good person to live with.
I was constantly in fear, wondering what was going to be my father's next move.
Windows would get broke, stereos would be thrown out, things would be thrown out of the house.
When I would see my mother abusing my brother, I would yell at her and try to distract her from him, and take it onto me.
There was points where I would see her in a good mood, all joyful, and then all of a sudden she would be angry and like picking up whatever was close and like throwing it.
My sisters and I would just hide all the time. We would hide under tables. Hopefully we didn't get hit.
I remember one Christmas, my father taking all my presents and smashing them in front of my face and throwing them in the garbage when I was like 8.
My father never, ever apologized for anything he ever did.
There was absolutely nobody in my life to talk to about this. I had no one to help me out. My mother was also being abused. She became schizophrenic. She started hearing voices in her head. She became delusional, believing that the voices in her head were the voice of God.
When I was about 8 years old, my dad went across the street and he knocked on somebody's door. My dad was asking for his brother and his father, and they were both deceased, as well as he was looking for Jerry Seinfeld. And I was thinking, that's kind of odd. Why is he asking about them?
I would console her and tell her that everything was going to be fine. I was like 12, 13, and I was telling her that we were going to be okay.
There were some struggles with their mental illness when I was younger, and I feel like sometimes I became the parent.
There was some point where I realized the world's not going to end. She's not talking to angels. She's crazy. This is bad. I'm in a bad situation.
I don't think I always knew that my mother was a junkie. One day, like, the look in her eyes completely changed, and it was almost as if I didn't exist anymore. Like, she was looking at me, but she was looking past me, and it was really cold. And so, like, I became scared of her.
My mother was a prostitute, and my father, I don't know, he just wasn't in the picture.
My father walked out or ended up going to jail.
My mom was never mean or an angry person. She was more of a child, I guess.
My mom was an alcoholic, so she went to bars a lot, and she came home with many different men on occasion.
She never really wanted kids, and that was her time to party.
I don't believe that my mom was ready to have a child as young as she did.
Growing up and going through all of the, like, changes you go through, you just need your mom to, like, explain them to you, and I had to, like, look to other people for that, and it was really hard, and I kind of felt like I wasn't important, and that what I needed wasn't important.
Me getting hit and stuff, I thought that was their way of showing that they cared, like that they loved me, but that's not what love is.
I would go over to my friend's house to stay a couple nights or a night, and I would see that their family life was quite a bit different than mine was.
I hated families that were like that because it was not fair. It wasn't fair that they could get, wake up safe in the morning or go to bed at night with their mom giving them a kiss or tucking them in, or their father taking them fishing or doing something as simple as just, hey, let's sit down and watch a baseball game or something together. When my father came home, he didn't hit me in the face that night. He just kept hitting me in the stomach. Every time I would try to take a breath, he would just punch me in the stomach, every time. Over and over and over and over again. Like every single time I would try to take a breath or I'd finally catch my breath, he would just rabbit punch me again. So I'd lose my breath again. And I thought I was gonna die. Every time I would try to take a breath and stuff, I just couldn't. And I remember screaming to him when I finally got a good breath and stuff to top of my lungs. I was like, when you go to sleep tonight, I was like, I'm gonna cut your head off. I was like, I'm going to kill you when you go to sleep tonight. The next day, I went to school, and about halfway through school, I got called to the office, and they told me to go home, which I thought was kind of weird, but so I walked home, and I remember walking in the living room. My mother had just finished signing these papers that I saw, and she basically just looked at me, and she's like, you know, you can finally get the fuck out of my house.
It was at night. They took my mom and my brother's father out in handcuffs, and they went into the cop car. And I remember looking back at the building, and my sister was standing on the steps, and she was crying. My grandmother was crying, and I was crying, but I was looking up at the sky, and I can still remember, like, when I close my eyes, I can still, like, feel like the air was a little cold. I remember exactly how the stars were aligned. The cars passing by, like, it's so vivid.
I remember hearing that someone called the cops because they heard a lot of screaming, children yelling inside, and something about my mom hitting me with a piece of wood or something, and that's why the cops were called.
My Aunt Tanya brought me to the Hartford Police Department to give a statement and to have my mother arrested for abuse charges.
It was actually my 9th birthday. I was at school. I was excited to come home to my mom. My teacher told me that I wasn't going home, and I was like, why? What's going on? And she goes, well, you're going into foster care. And I'm like, what's that? I'm going home.
Just picture yourself as a child, someone coming in and just taking you out of your home, and then dropping you in a complete stranger's house. This is your new home. That is your new foster parents. Bye.
I remember my first foster home when I was 5 years old.
Going to my first foster home, I just kind of went with
But
it.
I didn't stay there
I
very
didn't
long.
stay there very long.
Moved to another one.
They drove me out.
I went in and out of 10
You're going
schools.
to your new parents' house. You're going to your new
From
parents' house.
Warsaw.
It was tough
I
being
definitely was missing my parents
It was
when I was
really
there.
overwhelming.
Why can't I go home?
At one point, I had a family. I had a home. And now I don't.
Okay. You turn the lights on for a few minutes. So the film from here. So that's the setup, right? The whole idea of these young people remembering what their home lives were like, and then how they were taken out of the home, and then they were placed in foster care. And from there, the movie goes into their lives in foster care, which was both good and bad. And one of the things that was really powerful in making this film, and you sort of get a little bit of it here, is that kids who are often in abusive situations and are taken out of their homes both are grateful at some level and are also devastated because they're being taken away from their parents. And as the film goes on, there's some wonderful moments where these kids say, yeah, you know, it was really bad, but this was my mom and dad. Like, I never saw them again, or I missed my home, or I missed my brothers and sisters. You know, often a lot of these kids had brothers and sisters, and they were, you know, someone went here and someone went to another home. So it's a very complicated situation. And the other thing that I find really powerful, I haven't seen this movie in a long time, is just, once again, the resiliency of these kids. These kids are all probably 16, 17, 18 years old. They've gone through the system. Many of them actually were at Johnson State College. A couple of the kids were at Johnson State College. Many of them, other of them were moving on with their lives. And when you think of what they had to go through during their childhood, it's sort of incredible to think, how did they finally, you know, how did they do this? So this film, there is a lot of hope in the film too. You see kids get connected to foster parents that change their lives, and they start new families with foster parents. You see a lot of kinship families come in and take care of these kids. So anyway, this film was really impactful for the foster care system in Vermont. It's still used as an educational tool when they're training foster parents. They still show this movie, apparently. People come up to me. So that's good. And hopefully it's a very compassionate look and look at the complicated underlying issues of what this is all about. Okay, now we're going to watch another film. This is a film I just finished a couple years ago called Just Getting By. And this is about the huge problem we have in the state around homelessness right now and food insecurity, which of course has been in the news big time now because of the whole SNAP situation. This was shot 3 years ago and focuses a lot on people living in the hotels. So we're going to watch the first 7 or 10 minutes of this, and then we'll talk about both films. All right, thank you.
Omicron is now receding across the
Inflation hit a new 4-decade high. Gasoline, which we talk about a lot, at least 60% higher than a year ago. Food prices 10.4%.
Vermont residents are feeling firsthand ruthless rent spikes in an unforgiving market.
Urban Development found Vermont has the second highest rate of homeless people in the United States, right after California.
2,800 Vermonters have been living in motels and hotels paid for by the state.
According to the Vermont Food Bank, a third of Vermonters have struggled to put food on the table. That's twice as much as compared to pre-pandemic levels.
With federal pandemic aid winding down, lawmakers are wrestling with how to sustain programs past next March.
There's a looming conversation as to what programs to fund going forward.
I gotta fill out paperwork, silly girl. We've been in a hotel for a month now. The place that we were staying at, they wanted to jack up the rent, and so they kicked us out, and so we've just been staying at hotels trying to find a place, but everything's just so expensive nowadays. It's hard to get your foot in the door.
So I'll call Katie and ask her where you are on the list. Have you done any of the housing applications?
So we've been on the waiting list for those for like 3.5 years. Highgates, Green Acres, all those.
We live at the hotel and because we're homeless and we have nowhere else to go. So I've applied to so many places, over 1,000, and paid a lot of money for applications and haven't got nowhere.
Me, wife, one kid.
There's more than 2 kids?
Well, there's 4, but 2 of them only are only with us part-time. They don't live with us, they just visit.
Okay. What state do you both live in?
Does denial count?
We really have a heart for reaching those who are homeless, addicted, and hungry. So we have a food ministry. 2 days a week we do a soup kitchen. So every day one of us goes down and we pick up fruits and veggies from local stores that are going to get rid of them because they don't fit the aesthetic they want on the shelves. We want to feed people, we want to clothe people, but the most important thing is sharing the love of Jesus with people. So.
Yeah. I just do what I can for my family, and that's all that we can do every day, take it day by day.
Right.
Thank you, sweetie.
How many times you been here? 5 times. And why is that?
Because we're homeless.
You're homeless.
People that live here is homeless. We got kicked out. And also because of the mold. There was a lot of mold.
Mold issue.
And because the ceiling fell down on my mom. I wish I would have lived in a house.
So that's my number. You can call or text it. Then we can start doing the housing applications and then get you guys on the waiting list.
Before I worked at the bowling alley, we were actually home care providers. To not have that home anymore, you gotta switch gears and go to something else. Waiting tables has always been something I could like fall back on, and that's what I did. We've been staying at the Quality Inn now for just a little bit over a year. Prior to that, we lived in our vehicles for 3 weeks, looking everywhere for somewhere to go. The last night that we spent in the car, it was 28 degrees. I probably lost about 12 pounds around that time because I wasn't getting proper meals. It was pretty scary at that point. How are you? Good. I don't make a lot of money with what I'm doing right now, and even if we were to get into a place, how are you gonna pay $1,200 for a 1-bedroom when you're making like $15 an hour? There's a huge group of working people that are working 2 or sometimes 3 jobs just to keep that roof over their head.
I'm a cobbler during the day, waitress, bartender at night mostly. It's not easy. It's hard work.
Yeah, baby, huh?
My baby's at home, yeah. There you go. You're welcome. I think people are just struggling in general. You know, they think twice before getting another drink, or they'll get beer instead of a mixed drink or something. So it's just impossible for a single person that works 2 jobs to afford just getting by. Everyone's struggling right now in Vermont.
It can be difficult to dream or look to the future when you're middle-aged and you don't have much to show for yourself, really. I own a car, and I have what I have in my room. So it's kind of tough to think about dreaming when you're working to scrape by. What are you gonna do? Just work harder. I have 2 jobs. I work at the dump, and I also work at the farm in exchange for my housing. I think I make $15K, maybe. If it wasn't for having this place to live, my rent being covered by animals, I don't know how I would make it.
I wish I could see my son more often, but you know, my financial situation just doesn't allow for it because I'm working from 9 to 9, like on an average day. And on a really bad day, probably 8 to 10:30, 11 o'clock. Yeah. So I'm pretty much just trying to save the only way that you can actually save, like, really effectively, which is the amount of money that you spend on stuff like food.
I was 20 when I got pregnant and 21 when I had my first child. I raised my children by myself, and I worked very hard all the time to try to make ends meet. But I would eat the leftovers that Nicholas and Silas had on their plate. That was what I would eat. Because, you know, you have to choose between fuel and food. It seems impossible for a single person on one income to provide for their family.
We're living on right now is $25,000 a year. That's for a family of 5. I got laid off. Thank God my wife is working. And then COVID hit. The landlord evicted us so she could sell the house. And the only reason why we found this 3-bedroom apartment is because the person that was living here died. Other than that, we would have been homeless.
10 years ago, I was homeless. You know, I had to couch surf. I was working at a dead-end job, making $9.50 an hour, working as many hours as I could to afford this apartment that I sit in today. It's been a very hard struggle.
Between 6 to 8 grand a year. That's the max that I'll make a year. Don't have mortgage, don't have rent. All I have to do is just pay for electricity and gas. That's it. I do a lot of bartering and trading and stuff like that. When you don't need things, it doesn't cost. I'm content. Content's good. If a person strives for happiness and they get content, that's fine.
I never had to worry about paying bills or buying groceries, and I never anticipated what life would be like on one Social Security. I'm luckier than a lot, but it wouldn't take anything to move me down into, I could be living on the street.
Biggest stressor is one day not being able to pay like the major bills like housing.
I don't mind being hungry for a couple of days, but I definitely don't want to be on the streets.
Living in the woods is not easy. One of my exes, her granddaughter, was homeless in the car with her baby. I'm like, vets, natives, and children do not belong in the damn cold. I don't care what you say. That does not fly with me.
Yeah, I sleep on the streets. I mean, it's not easy to say. It sucks, but gotta do what you gotta do. To me, this place is so important because I'm homeless. If I didn't have this, I would be out stealing like I've done before and got in trouble for because I had no money for food. And I walk all day, every day. I have to eat.
Their food is actually good, and I was gonna go to Lucky Buffet, but I said, no, I'm barely getting by. Let me go over here and save this $20.
Oh, I'll take a piece of apple pie. American is apple pie, right?
We wanted to take away the stigma of soup kitchen. Flowers on the table, no paper plates, no plastic utensils, so that when you come into our dining room, you feel welcomed. You feel like just part of the community.
When you are serving 150 plus meals a day out of the window, plus those that are being fed inside, and that's just for lunch, that doesn't include the breakfasts that are served as well. There's clearly a need.
I'm struggling with my bills. I'm behind, so I find it very convenient to come here, and it's nice to know that it's here. It is like a backup to help you eat also, along with trying to make it in the grocery store. It is very expensive right now.
Binding is making it hard for us people with Social Security and stuff, and we have to live on check by check every month too. That's why they keep the Martha's Kitchen open, because people likes to come here because the food is great and I like the food and stuff.
I make $500 a week, and by the time I pay for gas and rent and cable, I know cable is not like a necessity or anything. Phone bill, like I don't have no money. My phone broke today. I had to take like 20% of my paycheck to buy another phone. Like it's always something, man. It's always something. Can't get by.
I was working at a company called Peerless, which is a men's clothing distribution center. But it got too much for my body to handle, and I've been fighting for 5 years for Social Security disability. I had a heart attack last June. I've got cancer on my upper right lung. My neck and spine and jaw, I'll do that, and I'm still living in the woods.
We don't know their story. It could be 100 reasons why these guys are here.
Granny, this one's yours.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Some of them, I'm sure it's the only time they're going to get a good meal. I just love to see them come through the door and sit down and chit-chat with each other. I think it just gives me a good feeling.
I'm often asked, who are the people you would see in the dining room if I come by? And I'm like, we can make a list as long as you want. We can say addicts, homeless, people with mental health. We could say seniors. We can do all that. But I'm going to tell you, who you see in here, you're going to see someone's mother, someone's father, grandfather, grandmother, grandson, your neighbor. These are the people in our community.
I get dirty looks every day. My dirty
By the way, if you want to see the whole movies, you can go to our website and they're all streaming. So maybe somebody could send out a link, or you can just go to Kingdom County Productions. So does anybody have any thoughts about what's the difference between the style of the first film and the style of the second film? What was I doing there differently with the camera? Maybe you can answer. What was different? Yes. Okay, right. It was more chaotic, and part of that was it was capturing what's happening in front of the camera, right? The first one was all interview. So you went from one interview to another interview to another. You created a story through people just talking. This is you're actually in the room with people, right? You're in the hotel where people are like, what's going on here? Oh, people are trying to get housing. You're in Martha's Kitchen in that moment, which is this fabulous place in St. Albans where they give breakfast and lunch to anybody. We spent 3 days there over 8 months just hanging out in Martha's Kitchen and just talking to whoever was in the kitchen and in the dining room. It's a different style. And that you're right, it's more all over the place. It's like as if you walked into the room and you're seeing what's going on around you. There are some interviews in here, but primarily this film, this Just Getting By film, is really going into those worlds and having the camera capture those moments. So a little later on, we're going to go into people who are living in the hotels, for instance, and there's a family, a couple with 5 kids living in 2 hotel rooms. And we just spend time in those 2 hotel rooms. They're connected together, and how they cook their food and how they deal with homework and how they all, deal with being on top of each other. So I've done both styles of film, and there's so many different styles of documentary. There's documentaries where the person who's shooting the film is actually in the movie. If anybody has seen any Michael Moore films, for instance, those are films where the filmmaker is actually the narrator, and you actually see them in the movie. You never hear my voice in any of this. You don't know that I made the movie unless you see the end credits. So anyway, but once again, for me as a filmmaker and my cinematographer, in some ways it's more exciting to be in places where you're just with the camera and you're trying to discover things, because it's sort of exciting. It's also really scary because you're like, we're going to spend 2 hours at Martha's Kitchen, but we don't know what we're going to get. Maybe we won't get anything good. But sometimes, you can shoot 3 hours of footage and you can get 10 minutes of awesome footage. So that's what you're looking for. So it's a really fun way to shoot because you're totally discovering stuff in front of the camera and you're taking a risk. And my cinematographer has a big camera. And so, when we were hanging out in Martha's Kitchen, a lot of these people were like, what are you doing here? And we would have to explain to them. And most of the people were fine shooting them or just talking for a few minutes with them. Eventually, the guy who's homeless takes us to his tent, which is outside the city of St. Albans, and we go and see where he lives in this tent city. So you also, in these moments, hope that you will discover somebody who will then take you somewhere else, right? Because I often say to young filmmakers, that really you can have an idea of what you want to shoot, but really what you want is like magical things happening that you never even thought about, because that's where the really powerful stuff happens. Okay, so I guess we have 15 more minutes, so just wanted to open it up for any questions, thoughts, comments, anything anybody has to say about anything. Yes. Oh, microphone, okay. Not on, it's not on. You have to push it.
Here? Let's try this one. What do you anticipate your next film will be?
Yes, very good question. So I finished this film, touring it last fall, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do next? And with all due respect to everybody here, I had a pretty good idea that Trump was going to win. And I said, you know what? I don't think I can go into the next 2 years with Trump being president and all that that was going to entail and take on another big, huge, honkin', traumatic issue. I said, for my own mental health, I need to do something that's like truly positive. All my films, if you watch this film through the end, I think you see a lot of positive things. But I wanted to just focus on what people were doing every day in their communities to make a difference. And so I just finished shooting my next film. It's called Every Day, Big and Small. And it is a series of portraits of people across Vermont who are doing big and small things, most of whom we don't even know about, in their communities to create connection, community, resilience, who are making a positive impact. And it's been really great because while I've been shooting, I've had a smile on my face the entire time. Which is, I think, what we all need right now. We need to find hope. We need to find the idea that even with all of the insanity and challenges that are happening in this country, people are doing their best every day, and people are creating good things that are stunning. And they may not get they may not be on the CNN and NBC News, but there's things that people do that are extraordinary. And so I'm thinking, for instance, we shot, one of the portraits is of this amazing dance class here in Burlington for Parkinson's. I don't know if anybody knows about it, but somebody told me about it. And we shot the dance class, and I had a smile on my face the entire time. It was the most joyful thing in the world. This woman does this dance class. It's totally impactful, completely, like, the people in the class are loving every second of it, and it just makes you feel so good about the world. So that's one example. So yeah, that's my next movie, and it'll be out next fall. Yes.
The three snippets of films that you showed, a lot of the topics intersect with each other, and I wondered if you'd ever thought of going back and re-interviewing some of the people that you profiled.
Yeah,
here's a snippet of Hungry Heart, and here's kind of what's happening today with that person.
Yeah, that's a good question. I get asked that a lot. I guess to answer that question, it's partly money. Because in order to make another movie like that, I need to figure out where I'm going to get the money to do that. And many times these films come because somebody is interested in this particular topic. So I feel like, for instance, with Hungry Heart, I've made 2 films already. I made a film actually before Hungry Heart on addiction and recovery. And so whether somebody would give me money to do a third one, who knows? But one thing that I will say is that, yes, I often sort of joke and say I'm just making the same movie over and over again because, of course, every movie has intersection, right? So this is about food and housing insecurity, but obviously you see people in the film who struggle with trauma, addiction, poverty, incarceration, this other film that I made about incarceration. So all these social issues intertwine with each other. I do keep track of a lot of these people. Some people... I get very close to some of the people in my movie because not only are they in my movie, but then I tour with them. For A Hungry Heart, for instance, there was a woman that I toured with all over the country. We went to Alaska together. I mean, we went everywhere. But, time goes by, you lose track. Some people you just meet for a brief second and then you never see them again. So it's sort of an odd thing. It's like you get into this very intense place making this movie, and then 5 years later, 6 years later, you lose track of these people. But it's a good question. Who knows? Maybe I will go back sometime. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I wondered if you could take us back to 20 years ago. I don't know. Did something click that you wanted to change from making commercial and indie films to doing social justice films?
Yeah, I think you're probably referring to my first work, which was with my husband, Jay Craven. Jay and I started Kingdom County Productions in 1991, And I had never made movies. By the way, I never went to film school. I actually was in theater for years. I did a lot of producing of theater. And Jay hired me to come and make movies with him. And I was like, what are you talking about? I've never made a movie in my life. And he said, well, you've worked with actors, you've raised money, it's all the same thing. Ha ha ha. So I moved up to the Northeast Kingdom, and we started Kingdom County Productions. We made our first film, High Water, which was a short film based on a Howard Mosher story. So a lot of Jay's films, as many of you probably know, are based on Howard Mosher stories. He's a writer up in the Northeast Kingdom. Then from that, we made Where the Rivers Flow North, which was a big film that I co-produced with him, and then A Stranger in the Kingdom. And those were all good. They were extremely challenging. I would not call them commercial at all because they were very indie films, and we raised all the money in Vermont, and it was very challenging. But I mean, to be perfectly frank, I was like, I want to do my own thing. I love my husband, but I was like, I want to do something on my own. And I fell into documentary because during that period of time, I was St. Johnsbury. I live in Peacham, but St. Johnsbury is the closest town, bigger town. And I was volunteering at a domestic violence organization, and I started working with women and telling their stories. And I got very interested in them telling their stories through a theater production, which was my background. We did a theater production. It was amazing. And I said, I want to document this because the power of storytelling has changed these women. It's created dialogue with audiences. I had never made a documentary film in my life, but I found a woman in Vermont, Mary Arbuckle, who had made a couple films, and I partnered with her, and I made my first documentary called Journey into Courage about women. This was about 1995, maybe, about women telling their stories about being survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse, and really got hooked into documentary. I just loved it because it was both artistic, and I've always been interested in the arts, but it was also activism and a sense of really grassroots storytelling. And so then I, finished that. Then I made my next film and my next film, and then I started making films on my own. And so my husband and I, partner with each other. We support each other's work, but he really makes, the fiction films, and I make the documentary films. And so far, we're still together and having a good time. Yeah, Libby.
Thanks. I fell in love with Granny in the thing. Oh, bring her along here. Anyway, my question is about captions. Some of us are aged, and we find that we get along in films better if we could read captions. Do you think about that? I'm sure you've thought about it. Do you not want to do that? I could get so much more out of your film if you had captions.
Captions. Yes. Well, I have to say that, first of all, I watch television constantly. My husband and I are addicted to Netflix and Amazon and all of it. And every time we see a BBC film, we turn on the caption thing. And it certainly helps. Yes. I would say honestly that if you were to watch this, I believe if you were to watch this online, you could press a caption thing and it would come up. For a filmmaker, it's hard because it's, you're creating art. It's like sort of like creating a painting and then having to write underneath it what it is. So it's always a little cringy because it's like, you do see in a couple places we do put captions because we really could not hear it. It's a good question. And it's interesting. I go to a lot of film festivals. There are some filmmakers who just put captions, just turn on the caption thing, and it's just they put captions. It just runs through the whole thing. Doesn't matter if you can listen to it or not listen to it. And that may be the thing of the future. I don't know. But I do understand what you're saying. It adds a little bit to the expense, but it's also, it's like everything. It takes away a little bit from the experience of just watching the visuals. But you want people to understand what's going on. So I hear you, and I will continue to think about that because I think it's a good thing to think about. And as I get older, I'm like, totally get it. Yeah. Yes, back there.
In the first film,
the foster children. I'm curious about, I don't know how to say it, your intention in doing it. You're just showing this is what it is. And are you on the front end, are you thinking of a message? Or you said some of the kids are resilient, and I'm sure some of them aren't. As the film goes on, do we see the resiliency and that some aren't?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think part of what you're doing in a documentary film is you don't know what the outcome is, and you don't want to know, because then it becomes a scripted piece, right? I mean, part of documentary is, I don't know, it's like being an anthropologist in a way. It's like, okay, there's something under here, but I've got to dig it up and find out what it is. So you sort of go in, I mean, with this, for instance, we had to work through DCF. DCF recommended all these kids. So I would say, who are kids that can be articulate, have a really important story, are going to be comfortable in front of a camera, and these are the people they gave me, you know. And so I worked with what I had. And yes, through the movie, what you see is you see some of these kids who, all of them have gone into foster care. Some of them you see back with their families years later. And so it worked out. Some of them you see got adopted by foster parents and have gone on and been brought into a new family and are very happy about that. Some of the kids you see, foster care was a total disaster. I mean, there are a number of kids in here who talked about the fact that they were in 70, you know, not 70, but probably 50 different foster homes over 7 years. And are sort of, at this point, at 17 and 18, still struggling, don't really have connection with their biological family and never really connected with any foster parents. So it's not all la la la, everything's fine and dandy. But the thing is that they're still all standing up, walking around, and try to figure out what they're doing, which to me is like pretty astounding, considering what a lot of them have been through. The other side of the film actually is a lot about foster parents, talking about how challenging it is to be a foster parent, also how wonderful it is to be a foster parent, because I didn't want to just tell the story of foster kids. I wanted to show what is it like to be a foster parent. That is a huge freaking deal. And also there's a section about parents, biological parents, who lose their kids into the system or give their kids away, and how that has affected them, and how devastating that is emotionally. So it's quite, there's many, many levels. Watch the movie, go to the site. You'll learn a lot. Yeah. Yes, next.
Here's a Zoom question. How are you making a living and paying your staff? How do you manage the marketing, et cetera?
Oh, good. Okay, how am I making a living? Okay, very good. Is that somebody from Zoom? Oh, okay. Hello, Zoom people, wherever you are. Yes, okay. So independent filmmaking, you mentioned it before, is extremely challenging. We are a nonprofit. Kingdom County Productions is a nonprofit. So the way I make my films is every single film I have to raise money to make the movie. I have been very lucky over 30 years to slowly build relationships with organizations, philanthropists, and foundations that support my work. Frankly, it's been incredible because a number of my films have been highly funded by state departments. So as I said, we got quite a decent amount of underwriting from Department of Children and Families. Department of Health has supported a number of my films, including The Hungry Heart. Department of Corrections essentially underwrote my entire film around folks coming out of incarceration into small communities through the COSA program. So without that state funding, that would have been really hard to make those movies. I've also worked over the years with a number of individual donors who, God bless their souls, have loved my work through the years and continue to support me. And when those people go away, it's going to be really tough because I'm going to, be on my own. I mean, I've gotten money from the Vermont Department of Humanities. I've gotten money from other big foundations in the state, Vermont Community Foundation. But it's not easy. Essentially, I raise the money so that I can pay myself to make the movies. And then I also have to pay my cinematographer, my editor, the equipment, And then I have to have money to tour these movies, to market them, to schlep them, to rent the, theaters, et cetera, et cetera. So, my movies average, they usually take about 2 years from beginning to end. I shoot about, this last film, probably I shot 85 hours worth of footage. Some films I shoot 150 hours worth of footage for an hour-and-a-half film. That's a lot of footage, and so the editing process takes about 8 months to do. So usually between shooting over 8 months and then editing and then booking the tour, it's around every 2 years I make a film. And I would say the budgets are between like $150,000 and $250,000 for each one of those projects, depending on how large they are and how long they go. But yeah, it's all through nonprofit. And yes, we have to pay also just overhead at our organization. So it's just, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of grassroots work. Yeah.
Bess, I think that's all we have time for, so let's have a hand.
Okay,
Thanks
you.
for sharing your work.
Thanks a lot. Come up and talk to me if you want to ask another question. Thank you.